Okay, welcome to another episode of Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday. Dashi Miller here from Warrior Concepts, also known as OnlineNinjaAcademy.com for those of you who are long distance. We're back, right? Well, my wife and I are back. So apologize for not having something last week. We're well into what? 200, give or take, episodes of this training. So I appreciate everybody who's normally on, but we need a little bit of a rest. So here we are, right? So we're going to take a look at something that springboards off of this week's Kuden, the podcast that we did on Monday. And so we're going to take a look at how some internal workings, right, can get in the way. Just having a conversation with one of my students today, as a matter of fact, where we were discussing some of the incidents in my life where I've actually had to use this stuff. And it's not all ducking punches and not getting stabbed and those kind of things, right? I shared a moment where my car slid across some ice, went through guardrails that were not there because the Department of Transportation removed them the previous spring with the intention of putting them back, but they weren't there. And my car went off a cliff. And all the skill sets that I had to employ to bring it back, right? So the point that I'm trying to make here is that while the majority of folks are focusing on the techniques and the kata and the skill sets and whatnot that have to do with physical self-defense, that's all great, right? But there's a lot more that goes beneath or that's connected to this stuff that's really important, right? And the more of these things that we can ferret out and take a look at and work with, the greater our chances of survival, because that's really what it's about, right? Of course, if you found this either as a recording or you're on live with me and you're focused on martial arts training or whatnot, well, we can always say it's for self-defense, but if it's really about the belts and the flashy moves and stuff like that, then I'm probably not your guy, right? So anyway, what we're taking a look at is the conformity trap. And so this is a lot of internal work this time. So this is not going to be, I'm just seeing into the future, this is not going to be one of those like most popular episodes, right? And while we will not be talking about self-defense situations specifically, as in like how to duck the punch and all that, right? Everything we're discussing has everything to do with self-defense. It's kind of like when we're doing drills in a dojo, which is probably going to make up a good bit of our Friday masterclass training. What I often say to students is these drills. This is not a self-defense technique, right? This is not a kata, right? But it has absolutely everything to do with self-defense, right? Because they're the drills that they've got to be in muscle memory, right? Not in that memory. Okay. So what we're looking at here, and again, playing off of this week's Kuden episode, when compliance and compassion equals complicity, right? Complicity is one of those $50 words that fall out of this $5 mouth every once in a while, right? That means basically I'm going to be an accomplice to my own ass kicking, right? I'm going to be helping the attacker win. I'm going to be giving him advantages, right? And if we don't know about these things, then we can't ferret them out, right? And again, I just have a couple to cover today. We're going to get through this fairly quickly. So the traps, actually, it's all about conformity, right? But where it comes from is how we're going to kind of split this, right? But the traps, we're going to take a look at something that is, they're both learned, but this is how we've learned to do things. And then the psycho-emotional stuff is how we've come to believe things. How are they different, Sensei? This is about how to do things as far as like processes and things like that. This is how to be as a person, right? There are these internal kind of conflicts that can come out. This will show up as habit patterns. This will show up as choices. Both of them are going to come from a subconscious, behaviorally programmed position. Again, I said this is not for everybody, right? But I'll do the best I can at kind of explaining things that are going to be way deeper and way more complicated than what I'm going to do justice to them today. And then since this is traps, I called this the cure over here, right? They're basically training tips, okay? So just very quickly, top of mind, I just decided that I would give you 5 different ways to neutralize what we're going to lay out over here, right? So let me just bring up my notes here so that I don't miss a beat, okay? So again, we're taking a look at this, how, when compliance and compassion equals complicity, right? When we become complicit in our own defeat, okay? Or at the very least, we might win, but it's like the salmon swimming upstream, okay? So I can't emphasize enough, and this is what Kuden's about. It's what Whiteboard Wednesday is about, the strategic, tactical thinking that goes behind and supports the techniques and gives them the power that they have. Otherwise, they're just prearranged dance moves. Okay. So, but I can't emphasize enough the importance of aligning mindset with tactical readiness. And I get it. Everybody can do the horse thing, right? The whole nod, right? Tap your foot a couple of times, have some oats, whatever. But there's a huge difference between saying it and believing that it's true and actually working to develop that mindset where it's an all the time thing. Okay. So key questions that we're going to lead off with is, how might our quote unquote natural or habitual responses be manipulated by an assailant? Okay. In what ways can compassion become a vulnerability? Right. Now, I can't speak to most of who's going to be watching this. I don't know who you are and whatnot, and I'm not looking at my chat at the moment, but I know that based on what I think I know about most of my students and my regulars to this, right? Compassion leads, right? They want to be the warrior protector, not just some fighter who's like racking up bragging rights, right? They're not in fights every Friday or Saturday night after they got drunk and bumped into somebody else who was out doing the same shit, right? They truly want to help, right? They want to be the guy or the girl that is there to make everything okay, right? And so that compassion is absolutely not a bad thing, right? But we will talk about how the definition, most people's definition of compassion, or how we might have learned what compassion means as a child, and how that's going to have to be upgraded to the grown-up version, okay? But how can these things be exploited, right? How might they be already pre-wired inside where they're going to come out, and whether he's manipulating me to use them or not, the situation itself causes these things to kind of bubble up to the surface, right? So let me give you a quick little story here to kind of kick this off. Yes, pun intended. That hopefully will illustrate the point of what I mean about this subconscious thing driving an action, okay? It's personal, right? A bunch of years ago when I was in the military, I was a military cop, and I did counterterrorism operations, all kinds of stuff, right? And I really thought that I got over a lot of this stuff. I was not easily manipulated, those kind of things. And so I was stationed in what was then West Germany, and there was a seminar put on by one of my peers, but seniors, in Liverpool, England. And whenever my teacher at the time, Stephen Hayes, or this guy was doing a seminar, me and one or more of my students would hop in a car. We would drive up to a place called Ostend, Belgium. It's right on the English Channel. And we would take a ferry across to Dover and then drive overnight to Liverpool for this training, right? And so this particular training, my friend had several of his Royal Marines, right? These British Royal Marines, in to help, not as trainers, as security forces or opposition or whatever. So when we would do one of these night exercises, which I still do often with my weekend seminars and whatnot, we'll do this night training. And so it combines stealth and there's a kind of a mission wrapped around it and whatnot. And it gives us a chance to practice this stuff in real time and not just theorize about it, right? And so anyway, we're doing this thing, and the mission was to place an object in a certain place, and we were given a time limit, right? And so we were like the only team that made it to this spot, right? And I was given the task of placing the object, and what ended up happening was I kept focusing on the time and when the exercise was supposed to be over, right? And so it's getting really close, and so I throw my skills to the wind and rush to get this thing done as though it's some kind of a contest, right? And because I broke from good stealth movement, I became visible, and these guys came, and I mean, whenever they caught people, they would hook them up, right? Drag them off, put them in flex cuffs and things, and we were put in a room, kind of a holding cell kind of thing, right? They made it as real as possible. But anyway, I'm in this location. It required me to get low and into this tight space and place this object, and they hadn't even touched me yet, right? All they yelled was, "Hey, you, that's it. We got you. You're nicked, right? Get out of there," right? And so I put the object down, not where it was supposed to go, put the object down, shimmied out from this tight space, and stood up and waited for them to come and take me. And then when they put me in this room, right, I figured, okay, just under the wire, okay. But I sat there for almost another hour with these other people that had been caught. And I'm looking at this clock, and the whole time my brain is going, the exercise is supposed to be over. The exercise is supposed to be over. The exercise is supposed to be over. Okay? And during the debrief, that was one of the things that came up. What came up was my ingrained military obedience to commands, regardless of whether these people are in my chain of command or not. Okay? As soon as they said stop, I stopped. When they said come out, stand still, I did all of those things. Okay? But the first mistake I made was being bound by a time limit that I didn't know was true. What should have been more important was the accomplishment of the mission and to do it properly, right? Get in there. So while that doesn't seem like much, it was, because the things that boiled up from inside, conformity was I was given very specific parameters. We were given very specific parameters about the rules of the game, how things will be done. And I complied. Okay? Conformed to that thing. And then because of the time limit and how close things were getting, agitation and these kind of things boiled up and caused me to go from super stealth guy, like I disappeared right next to my team of 4 other people. Couldn't see me because I just laid down in this dark patch that happened to be in the shadows, and really good at stealth. But the agitation and all that caused me to throw all those skills away and rush, right, to not fail before the time limit. Okay. And they always say that you remember your mistakes the most. Never forget that. Okay. But something I took pride in, right? Military, doing things as a military cop, holding other people accountable to the regulations and whatnot was the very thing that bit me in the ass. Now, luckily, it wasn't real time. And by the time I ended up going to, actually, I didn't have that problem when I was deployed to Grenada during that little skirmish. So in real time, that didn't affect me. But 2 years, year and a half, 2 years after that, in a training event, I allowed an artificial deadline to cause me to throw away skills and to give up easily. Interesting, huh? Okay. That never happened again. Anyway, before we jump into the rest of this, don't forget, like, share. If you're over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications. You know how this stuff works, right? It helps. Doesn't just help us out; it helps everybody else out who is looking to get training like this. Got some kind of a weird alarm going off. Don't know. Anyway, all right. So jumping into this. We're going to take a look at this in two parts because it's ultimately the same thing, but we're going to work on it from two different directions. Okay, so the first one is kind of taking a look at this conformity in conflict, right? In the actual fight scenario. Okay, so what I really want to take a look at is how what we might call societal norms, and that could be society in general, or it could be just the conventional way of the way most people think about what's the right way to fight, whatever. Okay, could be from prior training. Okay, or it could be from unconscious or subconscious, uncontrolled responses based on what's going on and how that can lead to inappropriate responses or actions during the actual attack, right? So what might they look like, right? So first one, and again, these are in no particular order, but I might allow him to dictate the fight distance, okay? So I'm going to allow him to dictate the rules, so to speak, okay? The rules, right? So it could be distance, right? Could be the fight methodology, right? Since fight methodology, what that means is if he's punching and kicking, then this is a punching and kicking fight. If he is trying to manhandle me or grapple or whatever, then it's a grappling situation. Okay, those kind of things. But the big thing I want to focus on here for this particular session is allowing him to dictate the fight distance. Okay, and this will cross over to some other things as well. Okay. Another way this can show up is we end up mirroring his movements or his fight style. Okay, this goes to that story I was just talking about where I threw away my training because of external stimulus, right? So mirroring his movements and or fight style, right? Fight style. Well, what the hell does that look like? Okay, well, okay, our kamae and our postures, with rare exception, tend to be low and grounded because they were developed for use on a muddy, bloody battlefield or in areas where you had changing or unstable, loose surroundings, right? Ground, okay? They didn't have concrete sidewalks. They didn't have macadam or asphalt roadways. They didn't have carpet, this kind of stuff, right? So, and they also didn't have footwear with rubber treads and that kind of stuff, right? So everything, right? There, socks, dusty trail, wet grass, again, muddy, bloody battlefield, that kind of stuff. So we're low and stable because we're minimizing slipping and those kind of things. But I have seen people demonstrate stuff online. Sorry, that I didn't mean for that chuckle to like slip out. However, they're in ichimonji, right? And they're talking about how ichimonji is not fast enough. So they have combined it with their training in MMA, Taekwondo, whatever, right? And so what I see is them, right, bouncing because that's what they used to do in this other stuff, right? And that's how they perceive things to be for fights to happen. So it can happen in that case intentionally, but it could be my ichimonji, and this guy could be moving this way, and just unconsciously, I can start to bounce because he's bouncing, right? I can mirror his movements. Okay. Now, while different class, different strategic reason, we might do that, but not from ichimonji. We're going to do it from a karate or taekwondo pose to convince him that I'm a certain type of fighter. And then when he comes in, he gets his ass handed to him because he was wrong, right? That's Kyoshi Tenkan Ho. This is us being influenced by his activity. Okay. It could also show up where it doesn't matter. We're in Jumonji, we're in Ichimonji or whatever, right? And we're bobbing and whatnot because we're somehow trying to avoid getting hit by a jab. Well, if you're worried about getting hit by a jab, then you better be in really tight quarters where you can't move and create more distance, and you have no other choice, right? Because the basic lesson I give to my white belts, I got it at a very early stage and whatnot, is about establishing initial safe distance, which in and of itself neutralizes jabs. Doesn't mean that he won't try to jab or try to get you to flinch or whatever, but he can't reach. And even if he could reach, it's minimal, right? So there's this problem, right? Which leads to the third one, which is flinching even when he can't reach you. Right? Even when you're not in danger, when there's no threat. Okay? Just because somebody's doing something doesn't make it a threat. If he's doing something, let's say there's an active shooter situation, I'm sure somewhere in the world at the moment, right? I don't care if it's gangbangers or if it's in a company or something like that. And I'm not there. I'm not going to respond. Okay. That's no different than if I'm out of range and he can't tag me, right? Or, he's got that leg and he's loaded it up, threatening to kick or whatever, but I'm in a position with my kamae and I trust my kamae. It's rule number one with your kamae. Develop your kamae to the point where you can trust your kamae. What the hell does that mean? That means that your kamae will work for you even when you have a little slip, right? So the flinch response becomes moving in kamae, not this, that kind of thing that locks you in place, right? So if I'm out of range, if I know he can't touch me, if I know he can't reach me, right? There's no flinch, okay? Another quick story here. Some of you might have heard this along the way. One time, right after I got out of the military, we were staying with some friends while we were looking for our own place. Timing just didn't work out. A couple of places fell through. Anyway, staying with friends, and we didn't realize that he had an anger management problem. And so he took a nap one day and he said, I got to call my mom at a certain time, just make sure I'm awake. He told his wife this. And she went to wake him up, and he was dead to the world. So, trying to wake him up. And all of a sudden he woke up, starts kicking the wall above the couch, jumps up and is growling like a freaking animal and storms off out of the living room, down a hallway, into the kitchen where my ex-wife happened to be. And the next thing I hear her doing what she always did, which was play the peacekeeper. Calm down, you asked for. And the next thing I heard was, don't you ever effing hit me again, from her. Guess who found himself in the kitchen in seconds, right? And one thing leads to another. I end up with this guy bent over across my hip in a chokehold, just trying to control him. He can still breathe. He's still growling and all that. And he's in this position, and he tries to take this rear leg and reach it around my body, and he's trying to sweep or kick out my front leg, right? So my rear leg is under him. He can't get to that based on where he is. But he's trying to tag my leg, and I almost laughed. He can't do what he's doing from where he is, okay? So there was no point in trying to defend against it, whatever. He's just wearing himself out. He's just making it easier for me to control him as he cooks off this energy. Cool beans, okay? So again, conformity is, this may or may not have come from prior training, but I want to leave something with you that teachers have told me in the past. You don't have to have gone to a dojo or a self-defense class or into a boxing ring, or lots of people like to call dojo gyms, right? Or have done any formal classes. Every time you have watched a movie with a fight scene, or you have watched ESPN, if you're in the States, I don't know if they have it anywhere else, right? Any of these sports channels and whatnot, and you've watched fight scenes, or actual fights and things like that, right? They get loaded into your subconscious storehouse. Okay. So they may creep up and we may end up doing things that we saw but don't realize that we saw, don't remember that we saw, or more importantly, don't realize that they're in there and could possibly come out and trigger certain muscles to work. Interesting, huh? Psychology, what a bitch, right? So again, on the conformity side, see where this is all outside kind of stuff, right? Or outside in, right? We can allow him to dictate the rules, the distance, the fight style, whatever. That kind of leads this mirroring his movement, his fight style. We end up bobbing, we end up bouncing, whatever, right? That can happen. Or we can end up flinching even when he can't touch us, right? He's doing these little things, and every time he does it, we're moving, even though we're out of range. Or have we not learned how to properly be out of range? I don't know. Anyway, that can lead to some of these other things, right? So next side of this, actually, what do I have in here? Case studies where victims, compliance, or empathy were exploited. Oh, okay. A little note to myself, right? So yeah, I think I already gave that story where it wasn't, they didn't turn out to be a victim. They were presenting themselves as an instructor, and they just like broke the whole Budo Taijutsu system so that they could create this synthesis that made them feel better about acting more in accordance with what they believed real fights to be like, because that's all they saw. Okay. Empathy, we'll talk about that here in a bit. And I already talked about the psychological underpinnings. All right, so let's move to the psychological, psycho-emotional conformity kind of thing, right? The psychology of compliance, right? So what we're really talking about here is internal barriers, okay? And I know these are internal and they're coming out as well, but this is more of a intellectual or logical, rational connection to physical activity. This stuff over here is heart and head dictating choices, okay? Which ultimately will show up as actions as well. However, what we're talking about here is how upbringing, right? How we were raised, lessons we got, those kind of things, cultural conditioning, and even personal beliefs, right, can inhibit or affect, right, decisive action, right? So what might that look like, right? Again, we'll just take a look at three, right? So the first one, again, no particular order, right? Just based on how I have them on my notes, okay? The first one is a fear of doing too much. Right? I know, I can already hear it across cyberspace, right? Screw that, man. I'd rather be like tried by 12 than carried by 6. And that's always said by people who don't understand trial science and how badly the jury is going to be stacked, okay? And how it's a game between these two debaters called a district attorney and a defense attorney are playing a game as to who can win because they're worried more about their career and their success rating than your ass, right? But they're also ignorant of the fact that most people on the jury don't really understand the laws and whatnot, so they wouldn't know if the judge gave them bad instructions or not that were unconstitutional or illegal. Or it happens all the time, okay? All the time. So my point there is that if you lose to a jury of 12, then you might end up still being carried by 6, or you might have to worry about not being ass raped by people in the prison shower. I know I might get kicked off YouTube for that, but truth is truth, okay? So let's not trade one problem for another, okay? I would rather not be tried by 12 or carried by 6, which is why we have those 8 phases of effective self-defense strategy and training that we give our students, which also includes defending ourselves against the legal system. Not by lying, not by cheating, not by understanding it better often than the people who are supposed to be using it. Okay. All right. So fear of doing too much, okay? Fear of going to jail, right? Fear of how other people might look at me, okay? Not a bad guy or whatever. We'll talk about that here in a minute, right? Next one is fear of being hit, fear of losing, fear of looking bad. Okay? That's another fear, right? Fear of losing, even more primal, right? Fear of getting hit. Okay? I'm going to stop here for just a second. The number of people that I have encountered in my training who believe that by getting into martial arts training or ninjutsu or whatever, that was somehow going to make them invincible, that they could never lose after that. They would always have the advantage, and the other guy just couldn't hit them. Now, not saying that that's not the ideal. However, anybody that enters into this concept of fighting, whether it's being a soldier, being law enforcement, hell, being a human being in the world today, or being in martial arts and believing that they're not going to get hit. Okay, our job is not to not get hit. Teachers tell me this when I'm still a white belt. Your job is to not get hit or kicked or stabbed or shot, whatever. I know, kind of counterintuitive, right? Okay, that's not your job. Your job is to not let those things happen to the extent where the TV gets turned off, where it's all done. Your job is to minimize damage. If you can avoid it altogether, that's friggin' awesome. But going in believing that that's the advantage you have, can't touch me. I'm not going to sing the song, but it's not only foolhardy, it's ignorant. And I don't mean stupid. I mean, that's somebody who doesn't know any better, right? Or is fantasizing about being, something they watch in movies. Okay. So fear of being hit, fear of losing, fear of looking bad, right? People could be driven to doing stupid things because they can't even just walk away from this thing or de-escalate, okay? Because what would everyone else say? What's amazing to me is, especially in this art, people looking to be individuals, people looking to not conform. Where is it? That's conformity is the same thing, right? There we go. Conformity. Not conforming, not being told what to do. They're anti-authoritarian, all that kind of stuff. And yet they succumb to peer pressure because they're afraid of what their friends would say if they look like a wuss, based on whose definition. Okay? It's just interesting, isn't it? Right? So who's the authority here? It's not the man, it's the friends. Either way, we just substituted one authority figure for another. I find that very interesting. Right? The third one, I discussed this during Kuden on Monday. So if you didn't catch that, just go to the YouTube site, go to the live tab, right? And then it's at the top, right? So what we're looking at here is what I call mommy rules. The hell is that, Sensei? Well, at a surface level, using Ninja no Uge, it's a way to make people pay attention. That's what it is. Mommy rules, okay? What I'm talking about here, and it might not have been mom. Mom might have been a shithead, right? Might have been grandma. Might have been some other influential person in our lives very, very early. Could have been a teacher. Could have been a, who knows, scoutmaster. Whatever, okay? What I mean by mommy rules is in some way, things were explained to us to get us to understand or to be a good person. Okay? Good person. And what was attached to that was, like, we might have hit somebody, or we might have seen somebody else, one of our friends hit somebody else or whatever. And what we heard was, don't hit. Good people or nice people don't hit. It was as a kid. What harm could that do? It's in there subconsciously, unconsciously driving decisions and actions. Okay. So when I have the youth classes in here and we are like somebody pull, the kid won't do something or because they were taught, right? You don't do those kind of things. Or worse yet, I have an adult who won't do certain things, right? I don't want to hurt him. We're going slow. Okay. We're doing controlled stuff. You're not going to hurt him. He might feel a little twinge of pain or whatever, but you're not going to wreck them, not at that level. So, right. But I can't hurt them. I can't hit them. Like it's literally shutting down muscles on the way in. They just, the body won't comply. Right. And so either way, kids class or adult class, this is what comes out of my mouth. I get it. Mom or Grammy or whatever told us at a certain point, right? Nice people don't hit. But you know what? When we were little, that's all we could digest. Honestly, most parents don't know to go deeper or don't know to revisit the same lessons they gave their child at 2 or 4 or 6 or whatever, and keep revisiting it as the child gets older. So that the child ends up with the adult version of the lesson, not still carrying the baby version of the lesson around. Okay. So what I have to explain to them is that the grown-up version, I'll look at the kid. How old are you? 11, 12. Okay, good. It's time for the big boy lesson, big girl lesson, right? To the adult, it's time for the grown-up lesson. Okay. The lesson at this age is nice people or good people don't hit other nice or good people who aren't trying to hurt them. There's 2 exceptions to the good, nice people don't hit rule. 1 is in a real world situation. 2, it's in a martial arts school. Okay. So this jacks people up so much, right? This whole idea of good person doesn't hit, doesn't hurt other people. Okay. We understand the lesson, the intent of the lesson, but just with like a lot of rules that are out here in the world, right? The intention left in the hands of the wrong people or left in the hands of people who didn't learn the intent. They only learned the wording. Gets all fucked up. Okay. So again, this is important stuff. Okay. And again, these are things that I absolutely believe, otherwise I wouldn't be covering it, right? Are 1, not covered very much at all. And if they are, it's lip service and not worked into actual training. But this is in a category of things where either people don't consider it, they don't even think about it, or somebody mentions it and they just blow it off because, well, that's just like a real fight. What I would do is, or they learn it, but that they don't go and train it to understand how it really works. Okay. So an example of that, let's see, today's Wednesday. Last night during my Tuesday coaching call with my inner circle students, my long distance and local Ninjutsu students. Sometimes it's a Q&A, sometimes a topic. This happens to be weapons week for them. And so the primary topic last night was using the attacker's clothing against him as a weapon, not just like, not just considering how it's used, but like, how do you grab certain types of material so that you're not just grabbing the material, but when you grab the material bites into his skin, not necessarily to pinch, but when I move my hand and I move the shirt, he goes along with it instead of this kind of thing happening, right? Just taking advantage of things that people do, flip-flops or whatever, or sandals that the edge of the sole sticks out just a little bit. So I'm going to hit it so I can take that prong and get it to punch into the webbing between the big toe and the second toe, so that the knee collapses a little bit and that destabilizes him. Or just the opposite, these people that put on the slippies kind of thing, right? And they don't adjust the band so the foot is cradled by the sole of it and their damn toes stick over. Yeah, we use a koto-ryu tactic for that, where we evade and then take the side of the foot, slam it into the toes, and I don't give a shit if the toes snap back over the top of the foot or crush under it. That's going to cause the hip, knee, and ankle to kind of not want to do anything anymore as well, right? But I let off the class with talking about keys, right? And that bullshit thing of putting them between your fingers and all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying that it can't work in certain contexts. But several of the guys that were on the call have trained these things. They've actually went and tried to do it, not just against somebody on the street, but just doing some target work and all that, and realized just how, one, hard it is to hold flat keys between your fingers, right? Because they tend to move and shift. That moving and shifting causes the key to bite into the webbing and the nerve centers between your fingers. We call that col gauche, right? What else? Anyway, just these things. And so what I was covering was not whether or not that's possible. What I was covering was some of the things that people don't think about. Okay. One, time, and the ability to make that happen while danger's coming in at you, while the adrenal response is kicking in. So unless you're already prepping for it before anybody ever shows up in the world to attack, okay? Two, the adrenal response causes the hands to shake and become unstable and reduces the amount of fine motor skill you have to gross motor skill. And now you got a problem with this fumbling and even trying to get a key into your hand so you can stick it between your fingers, right? And then the third thing was the amount of sweat that we produce in our palms under the adrenal response, even when it's really, really cold. Okay. And then being able to hold that with that sweat lubricant kind of thing going on. So most people prove the point in a dojo, calm, no threat, no pressure. You can make anything work in that condition. Okay. So there's considerations, and this is where we're going with this. Okay. So again, what we're really focusing on with the psycho-emotional kind of stuff is combating internalized inhibitions. Okay. So again, Friday we'll take a look at some things and whatnot, but what we really need to be doing is recognizing these things when they come up for us and whatnot, and how do we override or train ourselves into a state where we can otherwise handle these mental blocks or these things, right? We'll revisit that scenario-based kind of thing that kind of popped up over here. But over here, what we have is the woman who has trained for years, right? Lots of martial arts skills, all that kind of stuff, right? Doesn't have a problem going to sparring matches and competitions or whatever, right? In the dojo, got all kinds of stuff going on and whatnot. And then she is involved in a date rape scenario, especially with somebody she knows and she cares about, and she can't bring herself to hurt them, no matter what they're doing to her. Okay. Now, before anybody blows that off or rolls their eyes like that's a cheesy, stupid ass thing, please remember that I have 7 years of police work, of police experience, and that was very common. Okay. Somebody being in an abusive relationship and he's hurting her, and she took classes to be able to defend herself, and she can't bring herself to hurt this person. Okay. Interesting, right? So again, lots of people train, but that little exercise in the dojo where somebody can't bring themselves to hurt or cause pain or whatever because of that good person kind of thing, that has stopped a lot of people in actual self-defense situations. Okay, you can look these things up. A lot of these police reports, even though they block out the names and all that kind of stuff, just read the conditions. Okay, and the kind of things that stop people. Sometimes it's lack of skill. Sometimes it's they learn skills, but they didn't learn how to translate that into defending against an attacker in today's world, right? So, in our context, it would be always training against a ski or a front stomp kick or something like that, and never dealing with the boxer guy or the taekwondo guy or the shoot fighter or whatever, and understanding how the techniques, they don't get changed. The technique itself doesn't get changed, but the angling, the timing, the distance, those kind of things get altered as soon as things become a hook, right? The uke and the gash has to be applied differently, right? Those kind of things. But more often than not, it's because something inside diminishes power because they don't want to do too much, right? Sometimes this fear here is like going to jail, but not doing too much because they're a good person. Okay. Interesting, I think. Right. So what do we really need here? We need a strategic realignment. Okay. Which means we need to shift the paradigm. Okay. We need to adopt a proactive mindset that prioritizes personal safety over social conformity. And I think people get that, but it's easy to say that when you're sitting around the table or you're, talking shit in the dojo with your fellow students or whatever. And it's very different from actually living that thing. Right? Another recent conversation I had with a student was talking about this whole warriorship thing and how like I got tainted, right? Getting into the art, training with Hatsumi Sensei, training with certain teachers early on that were all professionals, not just their jobs, but professional minded. And so I came out of a very different world, and I had a choice: catch up and develop certain personal traits that would make me a very different type of person, or find somebody else to train with. Well, that wasn't an option, right? So when people see this guy, confident, fat, bald, and old, and whatever, right? Wasn't always that way, and I wasn't always the confident guy, always the whatever, okay? It was the training that produced this, but it wasn't just the self-defense training, okay? I remember the first time I went to a seminar outside of my normal circle, because one of the guys everybody talked about, who was living in Japan, came back. It was being hosted fairly close. It was like a 2.5 hour drive to go train. And I get there, and we're like coming up on start time, and I hear people talking about this instructor, this guest instructor, and they're nowhere to be found, right? They're not answering their phone, whatever. And next thing you know, we're past the start time. Well, that's not a good show. Okay. We started about 2.5 hours late, and they were still hungover from a major drunk they put on the night before. Okay. I had never experienced that. Okay. But in the interim, wandering around, I thought I'd introduce myself and whatever, because this was not my circle of influence, and no other students went along, anything. And every circle I approached, I was stopped by the conversation, which was just a bunch of pissing and moaning and complaining about their life and people in their life and all that kind of stuff. And like, that was just not acceptable in the circles I came up with because powerful, confident people don't act, speak, and think like victims. There's no bitching, pissing, whatever, right? You're either going to solve the problem, or you're going to extricate yourself from the problem. Okay. That's how warriors act. And so that was just talking about culture shock. The technique training itself was okay, right? I learned a couple of things and whatnot, right? But if we're going to become warriors, it's not the techniques that are going to do it. Any monkey can learn the techniques. Okay. Anybody committed to being able to protect themselves can fight. They don't need to learn this stuff. They don't need to learn the techniques and stuff to do it better. Yeah, okay. But there's just an inordinate amount of people over these 4+ decades that I've been doing this art that have literally taken 2/3 of the art and just fucking tossed it away or just ignored it. But that's the stuff that makes you a warrior. Or that's the stuff that gives life to the techniques. Anyway, sorry, I'll get off my pulpit. I should have probably covered that during Kuda. Anyway, so what we really want to do is we want to start implementing tactical thinking, not in the situation. By the time we're in the situation, whatever skills you know or think you know, whatever strategies and tactics you know or think you know, and whatever subconscious, unconscious habits, traits, positive, negative, whatever that you have, that's what you got. Okay. This has to be done long before we end up in the situation. So what I'm talking about with the tactical thinking is with regards to the training. Okay. So before we can anticipate and disrupt an attacker's strategy or not let their actions or their attempts at manipulation affect us, right? And cause us to do things that they expect, right? Before we can do that in the situation, we got to know what those things are so that we can train negative shit out of us and positive stuff in, and hone stuff that we already have, so that our chances of doing more right things and less wrong things in a life-sustaining or life-threatening situation is just, it's our chances are much better. Okay, so what are some of those things, right? So there's the cure thing, training tips and whatnot. So I got 5 of them for you. Okay, and so these are all designed to help us anticipate and disrupt, not just an attacker strategy, but to make sure that we don't have anything on the inside that's going to start cooking up. And if it does, we can recognize it, and we have default mechanisms or frameworks that we can default to not let those things not only rule the day, but where we end up ruining the day if we survive. Okay, so these are training things. Some are physical, some are mental, reflexive, or reflective, that kind of thing, right? So the first one, we'll just start physical, which is learning to control the distance. Control the distance. Why? Why are we controlling the distance? To minimize flinching. I have to know whether he can reach me or not. So this isn't just about guesswork on the dojo floor. This starts with understanding that when we do that 4-part striking, safety, initial, safe, distance kind of thing, that when my partner sticks his hands out and almost not quite touches with the fingertips, not lazy, not bending, whatever, just from a shizen, we do this with sword, we do a spear, all that, right? Here, what he's doing is showing me the reach of somebody his height. So I internalize that. And so the height of somebody, my height, a little bit shorter, taller, way taller, whatnot, I know exactly where to be where I'm out of range, because from here, he has to step to get me. How do all of our techniques start? He doesn't ski. He steps to get you. Why? Because what the kata on the densho don't show is all the shit we've done before he throws that ski or that grab or that kick to make it so he has to step. And that distance eliminates his ability to do a jab. Yeah, but he could like leap at you and throw. It's not a jab anymore. And that's a lot of work to jump to. And the only reason why those things work is because this person is still thinking that fighting is nose to nose and toe to toe, and they haven't learned flanking maneuvers. They haven't learned narame. They haven't learned proper taisabaki, right? So there's a lot that goes into this, but the training category is everything that has to do with controlling the distance. And I know I can hear across cyberspace people just like kukan, control the kukan. Yeah, what does that mean? Because the kukan is different in different scenarios. It's different in a multiple attacker scenario, right? Kukan is also related to kudaidori, and that takes into account the environment, all kinds of stuff, right? So control the distance to minimize flinching so that he's not affecting us, because I know he can't touch me, right? Right? So next one, this is also physical. It's very physical, right? Where was that thing in here? Fear of, what was that fear? Fear of getting hit. There it is. Fear of getting hit, right? Experience getting hit. Experience getting hit. I don't mean doing that bullshit stuff where you get, and your partner throws a punch and whatnot. Sometimes take a shot. Okay. Part of our training here and part of the training of, because of the stuff that I came up with was every once in a while, you do something that keeps your uke honest. Because if you're not paying attention, if you're only moving because your uke farted or your uke started to move, and you're not actually watching the attack come in, and you're not actually watching it as it's evolving, as you're doing uke nagash, and you're not paying attention to the uke nagash, you're paying attention to the next thing you want to do, but you're not gathering any information off of it and whatnot, is you have no idea if he pulled his punch. You have no idea if he geared down. You had no idea if the punch, if it was just an extending arm. Well, he's punching. No, he isn't. He's extending his arm, and he's hoping you move so he doesn't have to touch you. Okay? So keeping your partner honest is every once in a while, don't move. See if your partner will actually like pull the punch and then look at you and go, you were supposed to move, dude. No, you were supposed to punch me. I didn't move. If you're not keeping your uke honest, then you're not training honestly. Okay? Your training is your responsibility, not your teacher's. My job is to pass these lessons on so that people train correctly, not leave a whole bunch of open gaps. Your job is to make sure that your training partner is actually a training partner helping you develop the skills you need to develop and not helping you build a sense of false confidence. Okay? I may not be liked for that, but that's the way it is. Okay? Next thing, right? We need to make sure that we're integrating. I want to integrate two things. One, use of force doctrine. Use of force doctrine, right? Usually this is associated with cops and all that, but it's actually tied in with, in the civilian world, we call it the self-defense doctrine. Right? What is that? All right. Well, self-defense doctrine is doing the minimum necessary to stop the attack, whether he runs off, he gets put down or whatever, and not doing shit afterwards that would land you in jail for assault, attempted murder, that kind of stuff. Use of force doctrine is matching the force to the threat. Okay. So this counters the fear of doing too much. I can't do too much if I know, and one of the things, again, there's lots of things in here, not just studying, not just reading it and memorizing, that kind of stuff. One of the things in here, okay, is as far as the use of force doctrine, okay, biggest thing I can tell you is to volunteer to be your teacher's uke or senior students' uke as much as possible. One, your ukemi is going to get way better because your body's going to have to, okay? But being the uke teaches you what the technique does to the other person. When you're the tori all the time, you see the outside, but you don't understand what's going on the inside. You don't know if that's going to just kind of control them and lock them up, if it's going to cause a strain, sprain, dislocation, how it's going to shut down other things or whatever. The uke learns 50 to 60% of any given technique, okay? Because it's being done to them. And so this knowledge allows me to choose the response level based on the threat and not guess, not just use my favorite techniques, okay? And the whole time I'm doing this stuff, I am protecting myself against the legal system, which is phase 8 in our 8-phase framework for effective self-defense strategy. Okay? So we're already prepping for not doing too much. Okay? Next one, now we're down into all this psycho-emotional kind of stuff here, which is one is reflection on purpose. Okay? Reflection on your purpose, your why. Why are you learning to defend yourself? Okay. Not so I can protect myself. Okay. What value do I have in the world? Who depends on me? And if I screw this up, somebody else is raising my kids. Somebody else is kissing my wife. Somebody else, you get the idea, right? What's my why? Just saying, well, so I can defend myself. And so like nobody, see, that's ego driven. Okay. Who can I help if I end up in intensive care, or I end up in the morgue, or I end up in jail, or whatever? Okay, that is going to help to get over the good person thing, because we have to recognize that we are a good person, and sometimes a good person has to do bad things for the right reasons. Okay, that's a reframing. I already covered this earlier with the baby lesson versus the grown-up lesson. Okay, baby lesson, you good person? Yeah. Don't hit. Nice people don't hit people. Now that kid grows up, they either choose to be a nice person or they choose to go fuck it. Right? But it's left up to them. But the ones who grow up, nice person, well, they have a hell of a time. Okay? I think a lot of people that do well in martial arts either have been abused, right? Have seen abuse, or they need some other help because they enjoy hurting people. Okay? I enjoy the training and I enjoy seeing the responses that my partner makes, but it's not about hurting them. It's this play thing, right? So I would say that the best students or the best practitioners have a kind of a balance between being sadistic and being masochistic. And it doesn't mean that we like pain, but we're willing to accept it because it's a part of the process. We're not going to go running away from it. We're not going to do soft training, not because we understand how soft training fits into the training paradigm, but because we don't like to feel pain. Okay, well, go do something else, underwater basket weaving or some other shit, because self-defense and neutralizing violence involves pain. Shit hurts, right? So reflect on purpose. And the last one is reframing the attacker. Okay, so this is reframing me and my value and why I'm doing things, right? This other one is about me, but it's external. It's kind of like this internal, external thing here, right? So this is all internal. This is the why I'm doing what I'm doing, okay? This one, reframing the attacker. Because I had a problem with this a long time ago as well, okay? It was beaten into me as much as I didn't want to have to like ever worry about that kind of violence and shit coming at me ever again. I had already convinced myself that I wasn't that person. I was never going to be like him. And then I got involved in training and would stop a technique midway, or I could still remember the feel of applying something and feeling that happening, or them, the yell starts to happen and whatnot. And I could literally feel, regardless of how much I was trying to will it to happen, the muscles shutting down to not complete that move. And I don't mean intentionally. I mean, I had no control over it. Okay. So one of my teachers said, "You don't like hurting people." Yeah, I don't like hurting people. I get it. Okay, I get it. Let me ask you a question. Do you believe that a wild animal that can't be retrained or whatever, right, that will always bite, that will always attack, that's vicious and whatnot, do you believe that they should be put down? Yes. Okay. Then let me suggest something. Let me suggest that this human being that's attacking you, okay, isn't being a well-adjusted, good person, human being. They're no different than a wild, vicious animal. And that's what it took for me. You're going to have to find your own, right? To click so that there is it's not a disconnect with hurting people. Because I know I apply pain to my students, to my training partners, okay? Just like they do to me. But it's the intent. It's not the maliciousness, right? The pain comes along with a properly applied technique. Not fast, not hard. A properly applied technique hurts at whatever speed. If we're doing soft training and the technique still doesn't hurt, there's a fucking problem. We're practicing to do techniques that don't work, okay? But the intent is learning it. My partner is sacrificing so that I can learn. I'm sacrificing so they can learn, right? That's a reframe, okay? The other reframe is when this guy's coming at me or somebody that I'm protecting, not a human being. They're the equivalent of a wild, vicious animal, and I will put them down, okay? But this is me. You're going to have to do whatever it is that you need to do if this is a you thing. For a lot of you, it's not. But okay, if you're an instructor and you're helping students, these things need to be a part of the training, from my humble opinion. Okay? Only because I've been in a lot of violent situations against killers. Okay? Not just the pissed off guy on Saturday night whose wife just left him and he was looking to beat on somebody. Okay? Dealt with them too. However, this comes from real world experience, and those are the folks that, as Hatsumi Sensei said once, I don't care what the belt is around their waist. I don't care how many techniques they know. I don't care if they know way less techniques than you know. You need to set your ego aside and go talk to those people who have real world experience, because they may not be able to tell you what to train or how a given kata or how a given technique or whatever is done. But that person is going to tell you how you better be training and what things you better be considering, or all you're going to do is die knowing a bunch of techniques. Okay. Not my words, his words. Okay. So again, this is what we have for this one. Always, right? Our Friday masterclass springboards off of this training. Let me just switch my screen here to get off my notes. Okay. So, right. If you went away for a while and you came back, we no longer just use Friday virtual training as the URL down here, right? All these classes now have their own unique URL. So you're going to go to onlineninjaacademy.com, controlling your response masterclass. There's a hyphen between each of those, and you can the doors are open on that. You can sign up and register for the Friday masterclass. It's $9, and you'll get the recording even if you can't make it. Whether you can't, whatever. If you show up live, then whatever we're doing, you work solo, or if you have a training partner with you, whatever, and then I can watch through Zoom and critique and answer questions in real time and whatnot. It's a little extra perk. Okay. So, but if not, no harm, no foul. Hopefully this helped. Hopefully it kind of gave you some other things to think about. I'm going to do something I almost never do, and I'm going to take a look at the chat to see if anybody had any questions, comments, anything like that. Let's see. Jimmy, konnichiwa, Jimmy-san, and Andrew Cummings, konnichiwa. Okay, konnichiwa. So I hope everybody's doing well. And if you have any questions, whatever platform you happen to be on, we're simulcasting right now on X, YouTube, and I think 2 places on Facebook, my personal profile, and on the online Ninjutsu training Facebook page. Right? So you leave a comment. As long as it's not flaming or bullshit or, can Naruto guys really do? I don't answer shit like that, right? But if you have a question or insight, or if you've run into these kind of things, not you personally, maybe somebody else, because we're all like enlightened and that's never happened to us. But chat about some things. If you're interested in additional training or just exploring some of the online or seminar options or distance training or whatever, you can go to onlineninjaacademy.com, period. Just click that and the options are there. Okay. So if I don't see you between now and then, if I don't see you for the Friday masterclass, I'll see you next week on Where's Whiteboard Wednesday. All right. Talk to you soon. Train hard.